what I remember of it, what I remember happened was and what kicked this off was that at church on Sunday in our young women's class, our young women's leader had told us, we were talking about, oh my god, get your shit together, holy shit. You did this just fine, you don't have to do it again. No, maybe. Hello, my name is Emmy. I'm an ex-Mormon atheist, and I'm here to tell you a little story about Brad Wilcox. Now, if you're wondering, who the hell is Brad Wilcox? Look at that smile. I don't think I can quite pull that off. He is a church figure. He is an author, has written a ton of books, mostly faith-based books around Mormonism. He served as second counselor for the young men's presidency up until, I think, last year. It's a pretty big deal. He's pretty high up there. When I was younger, I knew him as sort of a celebrity. He was kind of like a very public figure for Mormons. Mostly because of his books. I hadn't read any of them, but people talked about and quoted them all the time, in their talks in church. Yeah, his name came up a lot. Before deciding to make this video, I hadn't really kept up with him and what he's been doing over the years since I left the church. I hadn't really kept up with him at all because I never read his books. Apparently, he caught a little controversy in 2022 from Mormons as well as ex-Mormons when at a fireside event in Utah that he was speaking at, he made some racist comments about the church's history with Black members, which, if you're not aware, the Mormon church did not allow for Black men to hold the priesthood until 1978, about 150 years after the church was founded. Having the priesthood is a very big deal in a Mormon family. The father has the priesthood, which gives him access to the power to give people blessings, the power to baptize, things like that. It makes you the patriarch of your household. And while Black families were allowed to attend church before this time, Black men were not allowed to have the priesthood. And this does come from the racist rhetoric of the Book of Mormon, which basically explaining the existence of Black people by saying that their ancestors were cursed with a blackness of skin for being sinful. It's really fucked up. It's crazy how it just completely went over my head. Obviously, I grew up white and I grew up in areas where there wasn't a large Black population, especially not in my church. Most of my ward's members were white. So this stuff kind of just gets glossed over and people don't talk about the history. They don't teach about it. I didn't learn about it until way far into my membership, and I was born in the church. So it's something that the church itself likes to keep very quiet because it's a glaring issue that we're supposed to believe that God has all the answers and is timeless and that God's church never changes, that it has one true way of being. And yet 150 years into its existence, God suddenly reveals that he got something wrong and that actually, yeah, Black people can have the priesthood. I don't know. It's really pathetic. It's a pathetic way of trying to erase the church's wrongdoings. Anyways, Brad Wilcox had this to say on the matter in 2022 at the fireside. I don't know what he sounds like. I'm just making up a voice. How come the Blacks didn't get the priesthood until 1978? Maybe we're asking the wrong question. Instead of saying, why did the Blacks have to wait until 1978? Maybe what we should be asking is, why did the whites and other races have to wait until 1829? Did he think that was clever? Even asking, why did the whites and other races have to wait? Aren't you questioning God? Aren't you being like, well, why didn't you give this to us sooner in your omnipotence, in your omniscience? Obviously, this upset people, including black members of the church and members of the presidency who called him out, and it made him give 2 apologies, I think. Point here being, I don't respect Brad Wilcox, and I don't mind calling him out in this tiny little video that like maybe 50 people are going to see. Most of the talks that he gives and the church work that he's done has been around youth. It's been around like the children in the church, the teens, the college age kids, which is very interesting in regards to what I'm going to talk about in this video. Just a little bit about me. I want to make a video at some point going more into my own personal history with the church, but I was raised Mormon. I was born into the church. Around the time of the events of this story, I was 15. I was dealing with a lot of depression and anxiety issues that were not helped by the religion and not helped by the church. So yeah, let's get into what exactly went down here. In 2016, I attended church and I went to my young women's class where one of our leaders told us, if you are struggling and you feel like you need to feel God's love, then you should just say a prayer and ask to feel it, and you will. And this sounded like a great idea. I was like, man, I'm having a bad time. I'm really struggling right now. That would be great. Let me get some of that love, Jesus. Ew. I'm never going to say that again. But basically what happened was I did it. I went home and I closed my door and I made a nice little reverent space in my bedroom and I said the prayer. And I remember saying amen and just sitting and just waiting. And I waited and nothing happened. And it just hit me. Like I just felt this like deep fear because I hadn't felt anything. And my church leader who I trusted told me that I would. And it was terrifying. Like that was probably the closest I ever got at that point to my faith just completely crumbling because I just didn't feel that presence that I was always supposed to be feeling. I didn't feel love. I felt nothing. I wonder why that was. So I sat with that for a little while. I was questioning everything. I was starting to be afraid. I was starting to think, is God real? Like, that was the first time I remember really thinking, like, what if this is all nothing? Like, what if this is fake? What if everyone's lied to me? I don't know what made me consider this as an option. I know I had heard about Brad Wilcox, but for some reason I felt the need to send him an email. And I think maybe it was just because I was looking for like a higher authority. I knew that a lot of people that I looked up to in the church read his books and, saw him as sort of an authority figure on all sorts of things. So I don't know. I think what was happening is I just really wanted someone with church authority to give me an explanation, to quell the cognitive dissonance that I was experiencing. Here's how to not leave the faith, which is exactly what I got from Brad Wilcox, who did indeed respond to my email. And I have the receipts. Worry not. So I did write in my journal about this. March 30th, 2016. I had the most amazing thing happen today. I emailed Brad Wilcox about a question I had. A few months ago, my young women's leader said that if we ever felt lost and needed to feel God's love, we just needed to pray to feel it. I did that and I got no response whatsoever, and I was completely terrified. I kept wondering if God loved me or not, and sometimes I secretly questioned if there was a God. So this was months, oh my God, months of just kind of like wrestling with that feeling and wondering what had happened. Mormonism is a very emotions-based religion. When the missionaries approach a potential convert, they appeal to emotion with everything that they do. The desire to know what happens after you die, the desire to stay with your family because you love them and you want that to be eternal. And when they tell you you should get baptized, we're coming up on the point where you've learned enough, you can get baptized. Typically what they'll tell you to do is to say a prayer and, ask God if the church is true, and he'll give you a good fuzzy feeling inside. That's a lot of what like answers to prayers are supposed to be, is like a feeling that you get. It's all feeling centric, emotion centric. You kind of base truth off of emotion. And so a lot of times I had felt that. Now that I'm out of the church, I kind of look back and I interpret that more as, just confirmation bias, expecting to have a feeling, and then the feeling being created out of the desire to feel the feeling. And I think at this point, I made this prayer in earnest because I just was feeling terrible. I was kind of testing it, like if this is a thing that my leader said works, and this is a thing I should be able to do and test the outcome of, I didn't go into it with any expectations. I mean, I wanted to feel God's love, but I needed it to be big. I needed it to be obviously from some higher power. I needed it to feel supernatural and like from something outside of me. I needed it to feel external, and I didn't get that. I continue. I'd been thinking about it ever since then, and I finally felt a prompting today to ask someone about it. I emailed Brad Wilcox, and I'm printing and leaving his reply in here, which I did. But I actually have the screenshots of the emails still, so I'm going to include those in the video and also go into what I emailed him. So in my email to Brad Wilcox, with the subject line, "Can you help me? I'm sorry if this isn't the best way to contact you, but it's what I could find. I'd be very grateful if you could take a look at this email and help me a little. A few months ago in Young Women's, my leader told us that if we ever felt lost and needed to feel God's love, we simply need to pray and ask that we feel it. So that night I prayed, thanking for my blessings and asking for help, and I ended with asking if God loved me. I ended the prayer, and I'm ashamed to say that I felt nothing. Not a single thing came to me, and I was terrified. I just cried and wondered what it meant. I kept thinking, does God not love me? I tried to convince myself that it was the adversary blocking it from me, but I truly don't know what happened. Since then, my faith started to deteriorate, and I just wasn't as involved with church things as I easily could have been. Today, I had a sort of breakthrough, and I want to get myself back on track. I was wondering if you may be able to help me understand what happened, or give me advice on what I should do to regain my faith. Thanks for looking at this, and I'm sorry to take your time. Have a wonderful day. Emmy." Let's break this down. I think it's very interesting that I say, I'm ashamed to say I felt nothing. And I think that's because in not feeling the love, that either meant God didn't love me, I had done something wrong, and that's why he didn't give me this feeling. I was somehow praying wrong, or just being a Mormon wrong. To me, that's like part of the loop of what keeps you in, is that when you hear everyone around you telling, giving talks and telling these stories about their amazing spiritual experiences and the ways that God has pulled them out of bad spots, you really do feel ashamed when you aren't also experiencing that. When you're at girls' camp and everyone is around the campfire telling these really personal stories and crying, physically crying, and you don't feel the urge to cry, you feel ashamed of that. You feel like you're not spiritual enough, or you're not religious enough, and that you're somehow failing by not having the same emotional reaction. So it makes sense. I tried to convince myself that it was the adversary blocking it from me. The adversary referring to Satan, to Lucifer. It's really giving like the Joseph Smith story. Like in Joseph Smith's account, when he first prays, asking God which church is true, there's a moment before God and Jesus appeared to him where he is sort of like beset upon by Satan, and is in this like fog of darkness and feels himself being pulled at by Satan's power. I guess I was trying to convince myself that I was having a Joseph Smith moment. and Satan wanted me to leave the church so bad that he somehow put a magical shield up that deflected the beam of God's love from the heavens from my heart. It's one of those things where it's like, why would Satan have that power? If God is like all powerful and all loving and all of this shit, how would Satan be able to do that? Why? It's strange. I wonder what the breakthrough was. I don't remember exactly what got me like thinking about this more and deciding to reach out to Brad Wilcox of all people. I needed someone to reindoctrinate me. That's what I wanted. I didn't want to lose my faith. I didn't want to be questioning these things. I didn't want to think about what it meant if God wasn't real. So I looked for someone to soothe my cognitive dissonance. To my delight and surprise, he responded, not 40 minutes later, and this is what he said. I am glad you're reaching out to God and to others. In a way, I would say you got your answer by how you felt when you didn't get an answer. The fact that not getting the response you wanted made you feel terrified and sad shows how much you care about this. It's not that yeah, it shows that I care, but the reason that I was so scared is because this is an entire false worldview that had been installed into my brain, and not believing it would mean that I don't know what happens after you die. It would mean that all of the sacrifices I had made to try and be a good Mormon and to try and follow all the rules were for nothing. You know, everything that comes with deconstructing something that tells you that you have all the answers and brings a lot of comfort. Like it brings you a lot of comfort for things that you can't explain and things that you can't understand. That's why I was terrified. So the fact that not getting the response you wanted made you feel terrified and sad shows how much you care about this. That is how people who choose not to believe in God feel all the time. That's crazy. That's crazy to tell. Growing up in the church, you are told all the time that everyone else is miserable. You're told that if you see a non-Mormon person walking down the street, happy-go-lucky, clicking their little heels, having a wonderful day, they're actually miserable. You're genuinely told to think that they have tricked themselves into thinking that they're happy, but true happiness can only be found in the church. It can only be found serving God. That is how people who choose not to believe in God feel all the time. What a scare tactic. What fear-mongering bullshit. Basically to tell me that little bit of fear and existential dread that you felt in that moment, that's how you're going to feel all the time if you choose not to believe in God, if you choose to leave the church. That shit's effective, and that's diabolical. That's insane. To tell that to some 15-year-old who just reached out to you it's just, to me, that is re-indoctrination. That's fucking crazy. No wonder. No wonder they all turn to alcohol. Okay, so Brad Wilcox says, everyone outside of the church is miserable. Everyone outside of the church is an alcoholic because they don't believe in God. Okay, I need to just read the rest of this before I talk more about every sentence. They can't face the bleakness of life without faith. Maybe God was giving you a taste of what they feel so that you can appreciate the way you usually feel. You have the gift of the Holy Ghost. That helps you feel good and at peace and happy. How do people without that gift feel? They feel the way you felt after that prayer. God doesn't always answer us the way we think he should. He is teaching us. I think he was saying, Emmy, you already know I am here, and you already know I love you. I could give you a nice warm feeling, but I have given you that feeling so many times that you may be taking it for granted. How about I show you how others feel? Now you will recognize that you knew all along. Now you know that all the happy feelings you have had in the past were from me. Emmy, you know God loves you. If you had really lost your faith, you would not be writing me. You would not even care. The fact that this matters to you tells me you have faith and you have a testimony. Listen to General Conference this weekend. I think at one point or another, you will realize that what I have said is true. Please give me your mailing address. I would like to send you a little gift. Thanks and love, Brad. Oh my God. Oh my God. So he really just drove that shit home. That reminds me of the comparison of God to an abusive partner. It makes a lot of sense. The way that he quotes what God was saying to me, basically being like, every good feeling you've ever had was from me. And you are asking for more? You greedy bitch. Every good feeling you've ever had is from God, and every bad feeling you've ever had is from Satan, which does also teach you that good feelings are good and bad feelings are bad, not just in how they make you feel, but morally or objectively. Feeling angry is always a bad thing. Feeling sad is always a bad thing. And it really makes you try to avoid negative emotions at all costs, which is obviously not healthy. Like, you just end up repressing things until it bubbles up to the surface and you can't keep it in anymore. In a way, I would say you got your answer by how you felt when you didn't get an answer. What a way to twist the absence of an answer to a prayer into an answer to a prayer. Literally just telling you, well, the fact that you didn't get an answer is an answer. The fact that you felt nothing means something. And God is just doing a little test. He likes to test you. Kind of just turning it around into more shame, being like, you're actually taking for granted all of the good feelings that God has given you, and that's why he didn't give it to you this time. You're actually being unappreciative and ungrateful. This is crazy. I haven't looked at this in a while. Emmy, you know God loves you. Kind of just being like, you're stupid for asking. Why would you need to ask that? You know that. You know the answer. Are you dumb? They can't face the bleakness of life without faith. It's a common Christian apologetics point to say that, like, you know, life without religion has no purpose. You can't find purpose. You can't feel fulfilled. You can't find true happiness. Which is crazy because it's so contrary to my lived experience. I have never been more happy in my life than being out of the church. And the fact that you're told when you're raised in it that, like, all of those people who aren't religious, who you think are happy, who think they themselves are happy, they're actually lying to themselves, and Satan is deceiving them into thinking that they're happy. That's so gross. What a cheap way to just twist the truth and tell people that they don't know themselves and they don't know their own feelings. That's probably something that missionaries have to deal with a lot in terms of cognitive dissonance, because you probably meet a lot of people who look really happy. You probably meet people who, you know, are financially well off or not, who just, like, have great family dynamics, who have jobs that they love, who have pets and hobbies and, you know, all sorts of things that make them happy to be alive. And you have to square that with the thought that, no, they're actually lying to themselves. Like, even though they look so happy and they look so free, they're actually suffering. And you know better than them what they're going through. You know better than them what they're feeling and how their life is going. It's so gross. I hate it. I hate that. It's such a lie, and it's such an easy fear-mongering tactic to just tell people that, like, we have all the answers, and one of those is you will never be happy outside of this religion. You may think you're sad, you may think that you're depressed, you may think that you're struggling, but no. As soon as you step away from this church, as soon as you step away from this ideology, that's when you're going to be truly miserable. And that's terrifying as a teen who is already fucking sad as hell. That's, like, such a threat. It's a threat. So I responded and I said, Brad, thank you so much. This helped incredibly. I hadn't thought to look at it that way at all, and I feel so much better now. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for helping me see that. I will absolutely tune into conference and listen for anything that I may be meant to hear. And I suppose you're right, that if I had lost my faith, I wouldn't be seeking these answers. I truly can't thank you enough. I feel the spirit much more strongly reading that. Here's my mailing address, although no gift is necessary. And I just give him my address. Great. What the hell? Just the fact that he asked for my address and I just gave it to him. I just gave it to him because I trusted him, because he's a church figure. He's a member of the church, and I know that that makes him a good person, and that means he would never abuse the fact that I have just given him my address. It's crazy. I had a sense of, like, online safety. Like, I knew I wasn't supposed to give my address to random people on the internet, but he's not a random person on the internet. He's a Mormon figure and therefore is trustworthy. That is such a terrible power dynamic and setup for people who want to do terrible things. Much thanks, Emmy. His response, you are a sweetheart. I am glad you feel a little better. You are not lost. You are loved. The spirit is a lot like a furnace in our home when it is cold. We never even notice it until it is broken. I think God gave you a little broken moment so you recognize that you were really feeling it all along. Now you will be much more grateful for that furnace and will not take it for granted. Enjoy conference and keep your eye on the mail. I will send you a little gift. Love, Brad. He did end up sending me a copy of one of his books. I believe it was The 7-Day Christian. This one, probably. Which I never read because I thought it looked boring. It probably was. It was probably boring as hell. But this is just such a strange thing that happened to me. And I'm assuming that Brad Wilcox himself does genuinely believe in the teachings of the church and is not just a grifter, which I do think is probably true for a lot of them. I do think it's the kind of thing where you can be both indoctrinated yourself and also perpetuate that among the people that you lead, the people that look up to you. I imagine he probably got this email and saw it as a God-given opportunity, right? He probably saw this as like a divine orchestration. He probably believed that, God sent me to him to get an answer that would keep me in the faith. And so that's what he did. And he gave an answer that he knew would re-indoctrinate me. I remember at the time feeling very spiritual about this. This felt like a very positive experience. It felt like I had been given an answer. So to finish the journal entry, I feel the Spirit so strongly now, and I'm so glad I understand. I feel so much more at peace every time I read this. I've never even talked to him before, and he was so willing to help, so understanding and kind. I'm so glad I talked to him. If he had never responded to my email, I wonder if I would have also taken that as like a sign, because I definitely saw him responding to me as like a, this is the way that God is reaching out to me. I probably saw it as like, this is how God is helping me understand the message that he gave me, which is just like, God should be able to give me an understandable message. God shouldn't confuse me to the point where I'm considering leaving the faith. I'm considering not believing in him anymore because he was trying to make a point. That doesn't make any sense. So sorry, this one wasn't very funny. But I just really wanted to talk about it. It's just such a weird thing that happened to me. And Brad Wilcox, if you're out there, if somehow you're watching this video, fuck off. Get out of here. Go back to whatever bullshit you're doing. Stay home, actually. Stay home. Don't talk to any more children. And don't give any more talks at firesides. Bye.